Alright guys, so for today's video, it almost pains me that I have to do this, but we're going to have to make another video where we talk about why the officer didn't just tase him. And the reason we're doing this is because the other day on the Body Camera channel, I released a video, and this had a young man who was suffering from either some kind of mental health breakdown or some kind of drug overdose. My personal feeling is that he was on some kind of illegal narcotic, hallucinogen, something like that. He was armed with a broken glass bottle, was exhibiting signs of aggression. He charged at a police officer, and the police officer was forced to shoot him. Excuse me. It's early in the morning. I only had one cup of coffee so far. The comments of this video were absolutely astounding. When I watched this video the first time, like literally the first time before editing it, I didn't know anything about what had happened. And you know, I just knew that somebody with a glass bottle charged an officer. Officer fired his weapon. I assumed it was some kind of like bar fight scenario. And then I started watching it, and watching the way this went down, this was incredibly sad. It's a sad situation for the dude who was going through some kind of issue, and it's a really sad situation for the officer. This officer is someone that I know personally. He is a fantastic guy. He's one of the nicest people that you'll ever meet. He was in the video that I made with, I forget the guy's name, but the guy that owned the candle company that was screaming sidewalk and all that. The officer in this video who shot this man is the guy who was using sign language to the deaf woman who was also under the influence of some kind of drugs. He's one of the nicest people on the planet, and I promise you that he did not want to go out and shoot somebody on this day. Something else about this guy is he's a big dude. He's like 6'4", 240 pounds of solid muscle. He's not somebody that I would want to mess with. He's absolutely not a coward. He's also a military veteran. He's one of the best men I've ever met, and he's a fantastic police officer. He knows what he's doing forwards and backwards, and he can handle himself. The way people were reacting to this video, calling him a coward and all this other stuff, it really highlights one of the biggest problems with our society when it relates to police. And it's the hatred of police officers does not stem from the actions of the police officers, but more from the public not understanding what it is that police officers are doing, not understanding the most basic concepts of law enforcement. And I've heard the argument over and over and over again that it's the job of the police officers or the police departments or police in our country to educate the public on what it is that they're going through so that the public will understand. But at this point in time, there is no excuse for the public not understanding what's going on in this situation. There are hundreds of videos out there, hundreds of examples. The police departments are constantly doing, lethal force, non-lethal force, all this kind of training videos, all this information is out there. If you don't understand what's going on at this point in time, you are willfully ignorant. There is absolutely no excuse for it. At some point in time, the public has to take responsibility for educating themselves on this kind of thing. But regardless of those facts or how I feel about that, we're going to address this once again. So this is a situation where an officer pulled up on the side of the freeway on a 911 call about a man that looked like he was not acting right, looked like he was trying to get himself hit by a vehicle. We get these calls a lot. Usually when someone calls in and says there's somebody out on the road trying to get himself hit, they're exaggerating. There'll be a guy walking along the side of the road, and the person driving will say, "Oh my God, that's unsafe. I'm going to call 911. And I'm going to, and they're like, this guy's trying to get himself hit by a car. He's an idiot. He shouldn't be walking on the road." You get out there and it's literally just somebody walking down the side of the road. Or you'll get people that don't use crosswalks, and people will say this person is trying to get themselves killed. That will get dispatched as a suicide attempt, but you don't necessarily approach it like it's a suicide attempt, because 99% of the time it's something innocuous. So this particular situation, it was quite a ways south of Columbus. It probably took the officer 15 minutes to get there. And he found himself on the side of the road alone with a guy who was probably high, and he was holding a broken glass bottle. This broken glass bottle is a deadly weapon. So he's on the side of the road with this guy, and that's where it begins. Now, some of the comments I kind of want to go in my memory down through and just kind of dispel them. There were people saying, this guy was not committing a crime. Why was the officer even involved? Why did he even show up in the first place? Well, a person walking alongside the road out in the country like this, there are many reasons why an officer would interact with them. Are they a stranded motorist? Did they get kicked out of a car? Are they lost? Are they confused? Are they in danger? There's a lot of reasons to stop and talk to somebody like this. You don't need to have a criminal act in order to do this. The other part of it, people were saying, well, he's suicidal. The cop just killed him. That's hypocritical. You have to remember that this guy is on the side of the road. If he was literally trying to get himself hit by a car, sure, he's trying to end his own life, but he's not the only one involved in that situation. Police officer goes out to the road, finds someone that's about to jump out in traffic and get hit by a car. The police officer then focuses that person's attention on him, and it saves somebody else that trauma. Think about if it was your wife and kids, your mother, your grandmother, your brother, your sister, whoever it is that's driving down the road, and then this guy decides to jump out in front of their car. Think about the trauma that they're going to go through. Think about everything involved with that. You would want a police officer to respond to that and try to prevent that from happening. It's not just about this guy that was on the side of the road. Unfortunately, that's the part that most people forget about when they see these things. So those are reasons that the officer might have responded to that and been on the side of the road with him. Now, as far as the use of force goes, and why didn't he tase him? Why did he use lethal force? This is a very simple concept that police officers are taught in the academy, and it's important for them to remember throughout their career, is that when somebody has a deadly weapon and they're within a range of using that deadly weapon against you, you do not try to take them down with non-lethal force. That means you do not try to tase a person who has a lethal weapon that is within range of you. Now, one of the other comments that I saw from a lot of people were saying, it's just a glass bottle. You can take that, you should just be able to disarm him. It doesn't matter how big the weapon is, how small the weapon is, it can still do a lot of serious physical harm to your person. An example of that is I've got a really small pocket knife right here. I mean, it's about the same length as my finger. So I've got this pocket knife right here. Is this a deadly weapon? Sure, it's a deadly weapon. Could I kill somebody with this? Sure, I could kill somebody with this. Now, if I, as a police officer, was going at somebody who's holding this weapon, is my life in danger? Not necessarily. Like, the odds of them being able to kill me with this are not very high. But the odds of them being able to seriously harm me with this small knife are very high. If they're out there with this knife and they know how to use it, there's a lot of damage that they could do. Now, think about the approach of a police officer who's going out and trying to put hands on that person. They've got a knife and I'm reaching out to them like this. Even if I try to straight leg, kick them, they could stab my leg. There's a lot of things that they can do. This weapon right here is very dangerous. They could get me in the face. They could take out one of my eyes. That is something that is very possible. So that's why you don't go hands-on with a person that is armed with a deadly object. It could be a bottle. It could be a small knife. It could be a large knife. It could be a variety of things. That's where the taser comes into play. Everyone's like, well, the officer could have just tased him and that would have saved his life. Well, here's the thing, is that tasers don't always work. And I know that there's been many videos about this that are out there. Donut Operator specifically, he's probably the biggest, well, he's definitely the biggest police YouTuber that's out there. He did a very good job making a video a few years ago of when the taser doesn't work. But I've got a couple examples that I'm going to show you right here. This is a situation where I forget where it is. It might have been LA. There's a whole SWAT team trying to take this guy down. The video I have queued up is actually a news broadcast. We're going to hear the audio in a second, but there's probably 20 or 30 officers. They have Bearcats, they have armor, they have standoff distance, they have all these things. They're tasing him multiple times. They're hitting him with beanbag rounds. They're hitting him with pepper balls, hitting him with pepper spray, mace, all these things, and it does not stop this guy.
That didn't work. Tased a couple of times. Very erratic behavior there. It looks like he has something shiny in his hand.
So you have a guy carrying 2 knives, and then you have a bunch of SWAT officers in a Bearcat.
Okay, now things get really precarious. SWAT is moving in. We don't know if they're going to tase him or potentially do more. When you're holding knives at officers like that.
He's down. For some reason, they're tasing him. Okay, he's on the ground there. His reaction there, he's not reacting. He's able to get up.
So there you go. You had probably 20 guys hitting him with tasers, pepper balls, less than lethal shotgun rounds. The guy went to the ground, but he was still holding his knives up in a defensive posture. And then he was able to actually get up and run away from the officers. If you're on the side of the road by yourself and you have someone charging at you and you try to tase that person and the taser doesn't work, well, now you have, let's see, an inanimate object in your hands because that taser didn't work. There's still a guy charging at you, and this thing in your hand does you no good. You have to transition to deadly force and defend yourself. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. There are reasons that we have training and rules for police officers. If you're going to try to use less than lethal force against someone who is armed with a deadly weapon, you need to have time, distance, barrier, lethal force backup, and make sure you don't have any other options or have other options available. There's a reason that we train that way. If I'm approaching someone that has a broken glass bottle or a knife or a sword or something like that, and I want to deploy my taser, I better have a buddy next to me that has lethal force backup, because that way, if that guy gets pissed off and comes at me, I've got somebody with me that can defend my life, defend me from serious physical harm. I've got another video. Where's that one? Right here. Right here. This one's a little bit different. It's a YouTube short. It's harder to see, but there's a woman approaching a man right behind this car over here. It's a female officer. She's by herself. He starts charging at her and she tries to tase him. See, she tried to tase him. The taser was completely ineffective about this guy, on this guy. The taser simply did not work. And when somebody is armed with a deadly weapon or dangerous ordinance, you don't want the person charging at you while you're holding a taser. Some of the other comments that I saw were just absolutely, sorry, my knife is stuck, absolutely insane. Script. People were saying, well, you should hold your taser in one hand. I think I have the comments pulled up. Yeah, let's look through some of these, because I made a comment on here. I was like, you don't use less than lethal force against a person who has lethal force. If that taser fails, then you're going to be in a fight with an armed individual at very close range. I could even put up the maybe I'll splice that in here in just a moment, the 21-foot rule. The reason the 21-foot rule exists is because it's about standoff distance. If somebody is inside your standoff distance and starts attacking you with a knife, if you don't have the appropriate tool in your hand, you're going to get really hurt. I'll go ahead and splice it in right here. With the reactionary gap of about 1 foot or less, it's impossible for you to react quickly enough to even touch your holstered sidearm once the attack begins. At about 5 feet, the average officer can't even get his sidearm unholstered. Unless your sidearm or baton is already out, you'll have to rely on physical control at less than 5 feet. At about 10 feet, you might get your sidearm out, but you probably won't get a shot off. A suspect with a knife can close 7 paces and deliver deadly force in about 1.5 seconds. For the average officer to deliver 2 rounds against an attacker who starts moving at 10 feet, the sidearm must already be drawn and ready to shoot. At about 15 feet, your chances are a little better. If you're alert, anticipate danger, and are skilled with your equipment. But to deliver 2 rounds center mass, your hand would already have to be on your sidearm when the attack begins. Hey guys, I'm jumping back in because in my initial edit, I forgot to mention something. I think this is the right time to talk about it. In the 21-foot rule video, the narrator mentioned that you're trying to get 2 rounds center mass. That was another thing that a lot of people commented on is, why don't you just shoot the guy in the leg or shoot him in the foot or something like that? When someone is inside of your reactionary gap and you're doing everything you can to get your gun on that person and defend yourself, defend your life from a person attacking you with a deadly weapon. For one, whenever you use deadly force, it's deadly force. A gun is deadly force no matter how you use it. So if you're applying deadly force to a person, you're always at risk of killing them. Let's say that you are successful at actually shooting someone in the leg. There's a femoral artery. There's a lot of people that I have personally seen actually die from being shot in the leg. So stop saying that you're an idiot. The other part is if someone's charging at you and you draw your weapon and you're trying to get rounds on them because you are literally trying to defend yourself from serious physical harm. If you're shooting at their legs, their leg is a target that's like this wide at best, and it's a moving target. I don't know if you've ever shot a moving target that's less than 8 inches across. It's incredibly difficult. The odds are you're not going to hit that target. So if you're trying to defend your life, you don't defend your life by shooting at something that's 8 inches wide. If you got something that's much bigger in front of you, that's why police are trained to aim center mass. If you're aiming center mass at this part of the target, you're most likely to hit that target. It just so happens that that's also most likely to kill that person. That's just an unfortunate effect of attacking an officer while holding a deadly weapon. Police officers never will be trained, never should be trained to use deadly force in a non-lethal situation. The only people that would ever do that would be the extremely rare situation where you had maybe a sniper that had exceptional training and had the 1 in a million opportunity to take that shot. There was a video that happened actually in Columbus, Ohio, I think in the early 80s, where a SWAT sniper shot the pistol out of a man's hand. But that was a situation where the man was in a seated position, the gun was hanging below him, and the sniper had a it wasn't an easy shot for him, but all things considered, had a pretty easy shot on that gun. That is just about the only time that you'll ever see that in history, and people need to stop advocating for otherwise. Anyway, back to the video. So that is the actual reason why the 21-foot rule exists. It's not if somebody gets within 21 feet of you, you need to shoot them. It's that you don't let somebody inside of your reactionary gap without having your tools available. And if somebody is inside of your reactionary gap, that 21-foot give or take area, and you're holding a taser and they're inside of that, you're in the kill box. And you don't want to be in the kill box against somebody that is armed with a dangerous weapon. And I was trying to get to the point where he starts closing the gap with the weapon right here. Like right in here is the situation where the officer knows, okay, we're no longer in a non-lethal situation. This guy has a weapon in his hand. He's already demonstrated that he wants to use it. He's already demonstrated that he's suicidal and homicidal. This is a situation where you do not want to have non-lethal force in your hand because you're in serious risk of being harmed yourself. Let's see. I didn't read any of these comments, but like some of it, this guy right here, why not have a taser in one hand and your gun in the other? Tase him first. And if he doesn't sit, then lethal force. So you're telling me that you're going to have a taser in one hand and a gun in the other, and someone's charging at you and you're going to remember which trigger to pull. No, that's not going to work. And there's a reason that we train to have both hands on our weapon. This stuff where you got 2 hands, 2 weapons. No. Have you ever heard of a woman named Kim Potter? Kim Potter is a police officer who's currently in prison because she shot somebody when she thought she was holding her taser. This is not something that you want to do. Here is a pepper spray in the face or a taser would have saved this man's life. The failure of the officer should be prosecuted. He had the opportunity to retreat and wait for backup. I already showed you this video right here. This guy was hit with beanbag rounds, pepper spray, mace, everything that they had in their arsenal. That didn't stop him. So if you have one officer who only has one of those options available, what makes you believe that's going to stop him? And I also want to ask you, have you ever sprayed pepper spray on an individual who was in an excited mental state? Someone that's high on meth, intoxicated, or schizophrenic, bipolar, that is having a psychotic episode. What do you think happens to those people when you spray them with mace? It's not good. It definitely doesn't stop them. I also saw people saying the officer should have just sat in his car and waited for backup. That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, what is wrong with you people that would even say these things? That's kind of where I'm at with this. This is absolute madness. The idea that you expect a police officer to put himself at risk of being receiving serious physical harm by somebody with a deadly weapon in order to take them into custody, that is just not the case. That is not the way police officers are trained, and that is not the way police officers ever will be trained. If it ever were to come to that, I would rather be working at a gas station rather than having to work under those rules, because I don't need to go out and get myself all cut up for this job. I don't need to take unnecessary risks with my life. I don't need to lose an eye because somebody else put themselves in a situation where lethal force was appropriate. This stuff is absolutely insane. I'm basically at a point where I refuse to talk about it any further. You do not use non-lethal force against a person who is armed with a deadly weapon unless you have lethal force backup, time to operate, standoff distance, a barrier, and there's no other option. Those are the tests that you use when you're using non-lethal force against a person who is armed with a deadly weapon. I think that's all I'm going to say today. I'll talk to you later.